What if you can sit down with the world's leading scholars and just ask them anything? This is what this channel is about. I'm Jeremy, and this is a Student Lens, a series where students interview the professors and researchers shaping how we understand the world. Today, I sat down with Professor Michael Tomlan. He has spent decades in historic preservation and urban planning, working on heritage projects across Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East at Cornell University. And I asked him a question that's been on my mind for a long time. How is historic preservation changing with technology? His answer surprised me. Let's get into it. Looking back to when you were a student, what initially sparked your passion for historic preservation and urban planning?
Well, they were somewhat like your own. You were interested in humanities and history and engineering. I was interested in the same thing. Um, Before that, I was led to believe that by teachers in elementary school that I would have the ability to um, teach concepts and ideas to students and people older than myself. That encouragement essentially led me on a path to pursue an education, even though in elementary school it wasn't clear exactly what path I would take. Um, but historic preservation in general is a field of study which embraces humanities, history, engineering, and many more. So it's pretty obvious for me to proceed to follow my heart, so to speak, and my heart and my head in unison allowed me to go forward.
One of your major work explores the question preservation of what and for whom. As modern cities rapidly expand, how do you think communities decide what parts of their histories are worth saving versus what needs to be redeveloped to fit, in this case, future needs of people?
You have to pay attention to what it is that people believe is true, what they think is true, what they are willing to find of value. And each community is different. There's no two communities that are the same. You have to be able to look and listen very carefully. You have to be able to use all of your senses to gain information about what it is they think is important at any given time, and then realize that that changes. You're in Germany at the present time. German values the ideas in Germany, and you understand whether you're in East Germany or West Germany. If you look at the history in that bifurcation, that sets up a dynamic. But at the very same time, if you look back through history, Germany, as it is conceived now, was not conceived in the same way at all at different periods of time. So you have to understand relationships with people that may not be evident to the majority of the population in the place at any time and any place. At the very same time, you are going to school in Beijing. Beijing, as I knew it, is not the Beijing you know. The reality is, the Beijing I knew, everybody was on bicycles. There were no automobiles, right? It's a different time, different place, different set of ideas, and that leaves you to understand that different people have different approaches to what they think they want to save or not, as the case may be.
Or do you think that this actually makes the case you're studying more interesting and maybe appealing to future students?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because your sense of what is important, what you've grown up to understand and expect, is not at all what it is that even students 5 years older than you have. And I see, and I have seen for literally decades now, the changes in preferences.
Okay, now we are moving to the future and the development of your field. So, for example, we have emerging technologies like, for example, AI, 3D modeling, and digital mapping, and they can change how we document and preserve culture for future generations. What is an example that you can think of how this direction might lead us and how it might help or diminish some important factors in your studies?
Well, let me go back to what I said just a few minutes ago. We use different devices at this point, electronic devices many times, to interpret the information that we gather. So we're selecting different instruments to gather information. If you use a satellite, it's completely different than if you use LiDAR or drones. That's just one example. But the reality is, was always the case, right? It was always the case that technology was changing. So you have to be aware of the changing technologies, right? When I was your age, I was interested in what was possible with holograms. You don't even talk about holograms today, right? You've never discussed holograms in what it is that you've studied, right? But holograms actually, with three-dimensional imaging, three-dimensional, seen in 3 dimensions from any point in the room, the hologram is actually more powerful in many respects than your 3D printing. It's faster, more accurate, and essentially more transferable, right? But not everybody has the machinery, doesn't have the technology, doesn't have the electricity, right? Doesn't have the capability of interpreting differently. So that then comes back to the for whom. Who are you addressing? Who are you working with? Who are you as a professional in service serving?
So would you say that in this case, these technologies that have been developed need to be developed more to be really be applicable and uh useful for this context, and therefore that like some older technologies might actually be better because they have already been trained on mass amounts of data?
Yes, in many cases, the older technologies are superior to the newer technologies for reasons that many people don't understand. The, the basic question is, do you have the capability to address all of these technologies as they change? Because they will change, right? The AI of today is not the AI of tomorrow or the next day, right? And the same thing is true with traditional cartography. How did you learn about the world? Do you know anything about cartography? How it is that you map the world? Many people don't. They just basically accept whatever it is the satellites are going to provide. That's not the way to go through the world if you're really going to be accurate.
Is there any example of a case study in which you used technology to help you finish that study?
Oh, sure. The background, Borobudur, that's in Malaysia or in Indonesia. The reality is that the reconstruction of the temples, in many respects, depends on the electronics that we have come to deal with. That has been restored a couple of times using electronics. IBM actually used it as a case study early on when it had been basically decimated. At one point, they were basically matching all of the pieces so they could reconstruct it. That's a commonplace example. There are dozens of examples, right? Reality is it's now commonplace to use the electronics to assist, right, in such a way as to basically work with people in any number of ways, right?
Yeah.
To give you another example, that's another background. That's in India, right? That's with the pilgrims The temple is in the background on the other side of the river. This is the Tungabhadra River. The Tungabhadra is the seat. This is the seat of traditional Hindu religion, right? Reality is, I can flip out like this through dozens of sites that I've worked at, right? And bring you into focus. Understanding what it is that's going on in this image is partly understanding the people. Again, the values of the people.
Yeah. So now we are going to move to some student perspectives and advice you would give to the younger generation. First of all, if you could give a couple of suggestions to students today who want to make a meaningful impact in their future fields or career development, what would it be?
You'd study the people that are around you. You are in Germany at the moment. Where in Germany have you gone? Have you gone to southern Germany? Have you gone to northern Germany? What's the difference between northern and southern Germany? The predominance of Catholics in southern Germany, the predominance of Lutherans in northern Germany. What's the difference between the northern and the southern German context with respect to religion? The values associated, right? I take you to Beijing, right? I can do the same thing in Beijing. Can you identify the history of that particular location's development through time? So when you're in any particular location, you're paying very close attention to what it is your senses are giving you the opportunity to learn. And what you're doing, the nice thing about what you're doing, is you're relearning what it is that you already think you know in one context, in another context, and you've decided for yourself. This is rather quite exciting because you get to reframe everything in your brain and learn again.
That is some good advice. If you were given a second chance to do anything in your life, what would it be?
Well, I would pay more attention to the instruction I was given in 19, it was late 68. As I was going into, I was being drafted in the Vietnam War, and I was being trained to be a paratrooper. And I didn't pay attention to what it is my instructor was saying in how to land out of, out of a, you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, right? And you're coming down in a parachute, but eventually you hit the ground, right? Well, when I hit the ground, I destroyed both of my ankles because I didn't land correctly, right? And that has basically disallowed me. I can't do ice skating. I can't do roller skating. I can't do rollerboarding. I can't do any kind of things that pressure my ankles because I don't have any ligaments there. I don't have any. So that was a mistake. I should have paid more attention because that has affected my mobility regardless of where I am.
Okay, so just a personal question. Are you okay with your ankles right now? Have they become better?
Healed?
Yeah.
Yeah, but only to if I put pressure on them, they still fail. And so, I can walk perfectly fine, I can run perfectly fine, but only for a limited distance.
Okay. So, what is a story from your childhood that has shaped your ideas about a specific subject or ha has affected your growth?
Well, I think my childhood, such as it was, it basically taught me that I had to be patient and diligent. Right? Um, in part because while I could wish and hope for whatever change, it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And that's because of the fact that I didn't have the my family was not by any means rich. It was basically poor. And the reality was that I had only one pair of shoes, and the reality is that there was a limited range of clothing that I was operating in. So it was always recycling, what we now know as recycling. The reality was that the care that I had to take with not only my shoes and socks and everything else that I was being given as a hand me down, the recycling went on and on and on. So I learned before the term recycling became commonplace what recycling was, simply because of the economics of my situation.
Do you think that this has actually helped you made any decision later on in life?
Oh, of course, yes, of course. I don't throw away anything. I'm always recycling. And that's basically the first principle whenever you think about historic preservation. What's the value you place on whatever it is that you're working with? It's
So
all
would
related.
so would you think that childhood is actually the best in this case term to form a basic idea about what you would want to do and that the values are especially important for a student's future?
Yes, you are at the point in your life. It's actually scientifically proven that at the point you are in your life, you are forming the basic values that'll guide you the rest of your life. And do, um, I do pay attention to people your age very closely, because it's only by essentially working with you that I can transfer the specifics, right, that I've learned decades before you.
So would you say that by telling what you want the younger generation to do, you can make a more significant impact to the future?
Yes, that's why I'm discussing. I know where you're coming from. I know what the potential is. That's why we're having this conversation, and why anybody who is really serious about what it is that their lives could contribute to humanity more broadly, just beyond even the neighborhood, beyond the city, beyond in any country. It's all about the context and learning the values of the people.
Thank you so much for the compliment. Now we have one last questions
Mhm.
for our generation or the young people growing up in a fast-paced digital world. Why is understanding history and urban environments so critical?
Because upon that rests everything else. If you don't know where you are and why you are where you are and what it is that's around you, if you ignore the people that are around you and simply go on, this is where I'm so annoyed at everyone by the fact that many are using their cell phones to represent the world. And the cell phone is a delightful device. It has lots of potential, but it shouldn't be overused. It shouldn't be depended upon as a substitute for the real thing, right? If I had my wish, we would snap our fingers and go to Humpy, this particular part of the world. You would begin to see then and hear the chanting of the pilgrims. You would begin to see and hear the washing of the clothing as they purify themselves. You would begin to understand the importance of this particular location to this group of people, of this group of pilgrims. You understand then far deeper what it is that's going through their minds and what it is that's happening in that part of the world.
Okay. And now just for the people viewing this, would you have any book recommendations that really influence people's decision and actually give you more ideas and insights to the world?
Well, I'll give you a current example. I'm reading now a history of Cairo, a basically an award-winning volumes. They're award-winning volumes that describe Cairo in the 20th century. Now, it's a novel based on real live situations, but it's so well written that what you should keep in mind as a young person, that there's value in what is a novel, that is fiction, as well as nonfiction. Nonfiction has prejudices and preferences just as fiction does. But this comes back to the question that you really began to think about, is how do you develop the critical capacity to determine what it is that's meaningful to you in rethinking what you're thinking? What's the truth of it? What's the truth of it in this particular context? So reading is essential. In this, if I turned off the screen here, you'd see this office has several thousand books, right? From all over the planet, right? I continually read even today. I'm ordering books, right? And it's not just electronic PDFs. It's also hard copy, real books, right? And of course, I own a publishing company, so I have an interest in how it is that books are created, how maps are generated, right?
I will definitely be reading that novel. And just because I just came up with it, are there any specific people that influenced you a lot and that made you encourage you to choose the path that you chose?
I had one instructor early on who was educated as an architect first, a historian second, third a philosopher, and fourth a theologian. And he taught me to relate the history of ideas to locations, people, and places. Right? The history of ideas across any particular geography of your thinking will influence the manner in which your intellectual development proceeds.
A huge thanks to Professor Michael Tomlan for taking the time to share his journey, insights, and wisdom with us today. Whether you're a student figuring out your next steps, a future planner, or just someone interested in history, his advice on looking at old spaces with new eyes is something we can all learn from. If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button, subscribe to the Student Lens, and leave a comment below with your favorite takeaway from today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time in the next episode.